Great. Well, thank you everyone for coming. My name is Claire Thorpe. I'm the Director of Library Services here at Southern Cross University. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet today and pay my respects to the ancestors and descendants of the lands upon which we work, meet and study. I'm based at the Gold Coast campus, and this work was created on the nation of the Yugambeh people. I am mindful that within and without the buildings, the land always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So today's session is going to be a very brief overview of some very complex issues. We are going to focus today on journal publishing. I'm not going to get into anything necessarily to do with publishing books or other types of formats in the open access or open science space. And I guess I just want to be really clear from the start. This is not a session about the library telling you where you should publish. We want you to be able to publish in your journal of choice. And really what I hope you'll take away from today's session are some tips and tricks of things to look for as you're developing and designing your research publishing strategy, so that you're more aware of your author rights and so that you know what options are available to you to make your work more globally accessible and discoverable. So I'd like to acknowledge the input today of Julia McConaughey from the Office of Research, and Julia is here and hopefully will be able to answer the more tricky questions. And also we have Dr. Jackie Bolston-Home from our Client Services team leader. She'll be helping to monitor the chat today. And both Jackie and Julia have been really helpful in developing this presentation today. So I'd like to start by looking at the national landscape that we have here in Australia in regards to research. And I thought I would use this quote, which was published recently by Dr. Cathy Foley, who's our Chief Scientist at the moment. Now, for those of you who have followed the work of Dr. Foley over the last 12 months, she's identified open access as one of the four pillars of her tenure in the role of Chief Scientist. She's particularly keen to see increased access to research for people outside the walled gardens of universities. She wants Australian research to be accessible to people working in government, in industry, in business, and in our communities. And many of those people cannot currently access the research that we are publishing. This is also in line with the ARC's action plan for its new approaches to ERA and engagement impact reporting. The ARC has stated that rigorous and transparent research assessment informs and promotes Australian universities' pursuit of excellence, in that it's excellent and engaged with community, industry and government, and delivers social, economic, environmental and cultural impacts. And I would suggest that open access is an enabler of engagement with community, industry and government. And it also engages with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which you'll start to see more reference to here at Southern Cross University, particularly in relation to the development of our research clusters. So data collected by the Curtin Open Knowledge Initiative, which is our research project based at Curtin University, has found that around about 40% of Australian research is currently openly accessible. So 60% is hidden behind paywalls and can only be accessed through libraries like ourselves paying for access, or individuals paying on an article by article basis. So the majority of Australian research is currently inaccessible to government, to industry and the community. So how does this align with our research plan here at the university? Well, I've picked out a couple of the goals of the plan and popped them on screen there. But if we want to be an institution for the public good, both within our local Northern Rivers community and on the global stage, then we would argue that open access is one tool that we have to help leverage that goal. And the plan itself states that we want researchers to publish research as high impact scholarly outputs and to make them broadly accessible to maximise impact. And open access can certainly help with that. And for those of you who are seeking grant funding from Australian or international funding bodies, you may find that you do need to be highly aware of your open access publishing compliance. And there are links there. Both the ARC and the NHMRC have open access policies which align with their funding. Also on screen, I've taken a small snapshot here from SciVal, which is the metrics tool we have available at Southern Cross University. And from SciVal's sources, you can actually see that Southern Cross University's open access outputs is slightly below the national average at 36.3%. So we haven't yet even met the Australian average of 40%. So there's definitely some work that we can be doing in this space to increase the visibility of the fantastic work that you do as researchers. So what's in it for you? Well, open access publishing uses the same quality control. So we're talking about high quality, high impact peer review publications, as do traditional journals. What open access supports is an open method of dissemination. So there's no difference in the quality or rigor between subscription-based or open access journals. And there are different ways that you can make your research open that we'll go through today. We do know from research conducted by some of the publishers who are engaging in the open access space that open access articles can have up to 4 times the number of citations when compared with paywalled articles. And those citations come from a greater and more diverse number of countries. So it really does increase that global impact. And as I've mentioned before, making your research accessible beyond academia to influence government policy, to increase partnerships with industry, and to increase the visibility of your own reputation and profile are all benefits. I've also added on the screen there that ARC has a great workflow that goes through some of the things that we will talk about today. So if you haven't had a look at that, again, it might be a resource that you might want to have a look at after this session. So as I mentioned, there are a range of different ways to make your work openly accessible. So I'm going to talk about some of the current options that we offer here at Southern Cross, and also talk about some of the options that are coming in 2022. I just want to be really clear here. I'm not talking about free access. So the publishing environment does require financial investment. And so I will be talking about the different costs associated with open access today, how the library takes on some of those costs, how you as an author may take on some of those costs, and the publishers themselves take on costs. So we're not talking about free access here. We are talking about open access. So it is in the online and digital space. And we're trying to remove barriers that may be created by different means, whether that's financial, legal, technical. So it's that universal access that we're aiming for. As I said, this is very much about supporting you to publish in high quality. So we are definitely in support of your research integrity and making sure that you are publishing in peer-reviewed high quality publications. One of the benefits of open access that I've personally found as an author is the ability to understand more about my author rights and to retain more of those rights and have control over the types of licensing that is assigned to my research publishing. So the Creative Commons licenses that are applied to open access articles and publications do give you more control about how your work is used by others. And as a librarian, I'm very concerned about the preservation of digital objects. And so one of the key things with open access that I'm very much interested in is making sure that there is enduring and perpetual access to your research, that it doesn't disappear into the black hole of the internet in the near future or far distant future. Now, Julia at the Office of Research has provided some great resources around authorship rights and contractual obligations. And if you do need to find out more about intellectual property and your rights as a research author, I encourage you to have a look at the resources on the Office of Research website. And SPARC, S-P-A-R-C, is another great resource. Southern Cross University is a member of SPARC. They are an open access advocacy institution based in North America, and they have some really great resources that you might like to look at. So what we'd really like you to take away from today is thinking about open access as you develop your publishing strategy. Now, it might be that you're in a situation where you have published and you're wondering what to do now. Well, we've got some tips for that too as well. But really, we'd like you to think about this from the beginning. So as you're applying for grants, investigating what the requirements are and compliance for open access. But even if you are just looking at publishing work that you've generated here at Southern Cross, looking at considering open access options right from the beginning of developing that publishing strategy and thinking about how that might enhance your impact going forward. So that's really the two things that we're going to focus on today, about how you can build this into your publishing strategy from the beginning, but also what to do if you do have a publication set. Can you make those open? Again, we've got some great resources on the library website about getting published in our RAISE tutorial and also on our website. And the research office itself has some great advice on managing and developing a research publication strategy. We'd love you to think open right from the beginning. So what do we offer here at Southern Cross University at the moment? Well, the main tool that we have available to you is our Southern Cross Research Portal that's managed and maintained here at the library. Now, this is a place where you can put accepted author manuscript versions of your publications, and we will, as library staff, make those available dependent on the copyright restrictions and your author agreements with the publishers. So in the portal, we're able to harvest lots of information, metadata about your publications and make those available to help build your research profile and make your work more aware, more discoverable. However, we do need your help because we don't have copies of those accepted manuscripts. And this is an easy way to make your work more discoverable. So when I'm talking about the accepted manuscript, I'm talking about your final draft. So the version that has been through peer review, you may have made amendments in response to the review. It's that version that you have sent through as the final to the publisher. So it does not have the publisher's formatting on it. It is the Word document or PDF, the version that you've submitted post peer review. So as I said, we can add those into the portal. We do encourage you, if you can, to log into your profile, find the record for the publication that you want to add your manuscript to, attach it there, and then our staff will do all the compliance checkings and make it publicly accessible. So if you are able to do that, it's a great Friday afternoon job. We would love to have more author accepted manuscripts added to the research portal. The data that the team gave me last week indicates that only about 25% of records in the research portal currently have that open access accepted manuscript version attached. So we would love to see that number increase, and that will increase that open access rating that we have currently in SciVal as well. So please consider taking some time or reaching out to library staff to help you with adding your accepted manuscript versions to the portal. That is not the only type of open access that you'll see if you start to investigate your options. And I'd like to talk about a couple here today, some that the library supports and some that we're not in a position to support, but you can get advice from the Office of Research. And you will hear about the different colours of open access. And so I'm using the colour terminology as it's commonly accepted in the research publishing environment. So the first one on the top left-hand side there is called Gold Open Access. So these are fully open access journals, mostly hosted by commercial publishers. And rather than the library purchasing access to the publications through a read subscription, as we do with a traditional publishing model, Gold Open Access journals are funded through the authors paying what's called an article processing charge, or an APC. Now, we at the library don't have a budget to pay our APCs on your behalf. However, Julia might jump into the chat here. The Office of Research can provide advice on what options are available to you around APCs, if that is related to your grants, and they can also talk to you about how to build that into your future grant funding. And the High Impact Publication Support Scheme has just launched, which will support some of that work. And I encourage you to look up that scheme. I know it's being trialled at the moment for 6 months, and I'm sure the Office of Research would love to have some people getting involved in that scheme. But at the moment, I don't know how many people across the university are currently paying article processing charges. So it's something that's very difficult for us to understand what the cost to the university is in the gold open access space. So that's one that is a little bit tricky for us to manage and to understand what the impact is on you as researchers. And I would love to talk to some of you if you have paid for article processing charges and how we might get some more visibility over that. In the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see reference to the hybrid open access model. Now, this is a pay-to-publish model at the article level. So if you publish in a journal, you might be invited to pay an article processing charge for your article. However, the rest of the journal remains behind a paywall, which means I have to purchase a subscription to that journal, and the university essentially gets charged twice. So it's a bit of a double dipping model from the publishers. And this is something I'll talk about in a minute, about how we're working with the publishers to try and move beyond the hybrid open access article level model. In the top right-hand corner, I've mentioned Diamond Open Access. Now, these are fully open access journals like the Gold, but they do not charge article processing charges. And that's because they are financially supported by a university, an association, professional association, or a society, or even philanthropic institutions. So they are high quality, they are peer reviewed and free, both free to authors and readers, because their funding model is through other means. And DOAJ there stands for the Directory of Open Access Journals, which I'll talk about in a minute, which is a great tool that you can use to check the validity of particularly Diamond Open Access journals. So we are aware that there are predatory journals out there, so people who may contact you and invite you to publish in their supposedly open access journal, which is not high quality, which is not peer reviewed, and we do not want you to publish in those. So that's why we want you to use some of these tools to make sure that you're publishing in the best way for you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the tools that are available to you. The first two here I'll show some screenshots from Cymargo and Sherpa Romeo. And then I've got some others that I won't necessarily show today, but things that you might want to investigate afterwards. So the first tool there, Cymargo, is incredibly useful when you're looking to find a useful journal for you to publish in. So this is particularly useful in finding the Cymargo journal rankings, which is a way of understanding the impact and reach of particular journals based on citations from the last 2 and 5 years. So it's very much a bibliometrics tool. Cymargo ranks journals into 4 quartiles. So you'll hear talk about being in Q1 journals. So that's the top 25% of journals in your discipline area. I won't go into metrics in great detail today. Certainly they're sessions that our librarians can provide later on. So if you are interested in understanding more about metrics and measuring your impact, please get in contact with the library. But Cymargo is an incredibly useful tool, and I'll show you a screenshot of it in a moment. Sherpa Romeo is an online resource that aggregates and analyses publisher open access policies from around the world. And it summarises these copyright statements and the different types of open access for each journal in a really easy and clear to understand way. So again, as you're starting to develop your publishing strategy, Sherpa Romeo is a great tool that you can use to very easily see what options you have in each journal. Is it gold? Is it hybrid? Does it allow you to put your accepted manuscript in the research portal as an institutional repository? What are the embargo times and the like? Just a few other things that you might want to add to your publishing toolkit and have a look at a later date. I won't necessarily be able to have a look at these today, but there are other tools that you might find really useful. So I've already mentioned the directory of open access journals, which is a community curated online directory that indexes and provides access to high quality open access peer reviewed journals. So if you're unsure if a journal that you're considering is legitimate, this is where you want to go and have a look. Another tool that I found just this week, which is currently in beta, is the Journal Checker tool. Now, this is particularly for anyone if you are required to be compliant with Plan S or Coalition S funding from overseas funders. It's a really great tool. You can put in the journal that you want to submit to the grant that you've received funding under in your institution, and it will give you a result. So that's a really nifty little tool that you might want to check out. Think, Check, Submit is a really helpful resource, not just for journal publishing, but also for open access books and also for conferences. Essentially, it takes you through questions that you should consider if you suspect or if you are worried that you are potentially being contacted or looking at predatory journals or predatory conferences. So it's got some great frameworks there to help you, again, identify those high quality publications and events that you might want to be involved in. And thanks, Julia. Julia's just popped in the chat some great information there around article processing charges, factoring those into budgets, and being aware of your grant guidelines in the first instance. So thanks very much, Julia. So I just thought today, rather than trying to risk going out live onto the internet, which is always fraught with danger, is that I've got a couple of screenshots here from Scimago and from Sherpa Romeo, just to show you a very high level example of the types of information that you'll get in each. So as I mentioned, Scimago is really valuable for identifying those Q1 journals, and that's something that I would encourage you to do. And I know the Office of Research is really keen to see more of our publications in those Q1 journal destinations. And in each of these journal records, you can click through and get a whole lot more. And particularly looking, I find it really useful myself to have a look at how many years a journal has sat in the Q1 quartile. Has it just arrived in the Q1? Is it on that upward trajectory? Or is it a consistent performer consistently in that top quarter of your discipline area? The other thing you can see very clearly on the Scimago list here, and I've just picked a discipline list, I think, for e-learning, is you can see the little orange icon there, and that's the globally accepted symbol for open access. You can see on the screen there that in the top 10 of Scimago's list of publications in the e-learning space, that there are 4 that are open access. Now, at this point, from this information, I don't know if that means gold, will it charge me an article processing charge, or is it diamond? And really what I'd need to do is go to our next tool, which is Sherpa Romeo, to find out that information. So that's what we'll do. So here's a screenshot from Sherpa Romeo. This is one of those open access journals that I found in Scimago as a Q1. So what I can see on the journals record here is some really useful information for me if I'm choosing to publish here. So I'm looking for indicators of quality. So I can see here that this one is a Springer Open. So Springer is a huge global publisher. So it's definitely a reputable publication. I can see that this journal has a listing in the directory of Open Access Journal. And again, that's a great indicator to reassure me that this is a reputable, high quality peer reviewed journal. And you can see here, it says requires APC, and the answer is no. And it's drawing this information from the journal's DOAJ listing. So that tells me that this is a diamond open access journal that is somehow supported through Springer's publishing or some other funding model. The publisher policy information at the bottom of the screen here, and this is only part of what you get on a record, but what you can see are the different restrictions around the published version, the accepted version, or even the submitted version or the preprint. And each of these sections can be expanded with that little plus sign. But what I can see here with my Diamond Open Access Journal is the author licensing option is Creative Commons, so CC, and by, which is the attribution. And that is the most open of the Creative Commons licenses. It's not the only one that you could use in this case, but in this case, the journal itself allows you the most open licensing option available. I wanted to show you an example in Sherpa Romeo of a non-open access journal, so you can see the difference in the record. So again, this is drawing straight from the publisher's website, so the information is provided by the publisher themselves. So I can see here, again, it's a commercial publisher, but it is also aligned with a professional association. However, what I can see here is that this is not necessarily it is more of a paywall journal to publish in, for example. So this is a hybrid open access model. You can see the published version, it has that little pound system, and that's because Sherpa Romeo is based in the UK. So you could choose to, if you wish, publish an article in the journal called Distance Education if you wanted to pay an APC. Now, the thing to be aware of is that, again, in the library, I'm paying for a subscription to Distance Education. So regardless of whether you pay the APC, you will still be able to access it. But if you don't pay the APC, it's not open. So in this case, I would be recommending that you have a look at the next line around what are your options for the accepted version, because this tells you when you can make your accepted version available in the research portal here at Southern Cross University. And what we can see here is, to be honest, not ideal. It says accepted version can go into an institutional repository or a subject repository. So our research portal is defined as an institutional repository. However, the publishers in this case have said you may put your accepted author manuscript in an institutional repository, but you cannot make it available openly for 18 months after publication. So ideally, if you are publishing in journals that have that you don't have a diamond or a gold open access publishing route, ideally, I personally like to look for options in this line here that have 0 months against that little time restriction. My personal preference is to make my publications open as quickly as possible to increase the number of citations and the visibility. So I look for accepted versions with no embargo. And that allows me to make that accepted manuscript version immediately available through the research portal as soon as the published version is made available online. So something to consider there, just to be aware of. I do encourage you to consider using Sherpa Romeo as you're working out where to publish, and be aware of some of the restrictions that will be put on your work if that's where you want to publish. And again, this is not about telling you where to publish, but just to be aware of the rights and restrictions that you may need to comply with when you are choosing a particular publication. So I'm going to move on to, we've only got another 10 minutes or so, maybe less, depending on how quickly I talk. But I'd like to share with you some really exciting information about some of the work that's happening within a consortium that Southern Cross Library is a part of in order to increase the open access publishing here at Southern Cross and right across Australia. So we are a member of the Council of Australian University Librarians, and which is sometimes referred to by the acronym CALL. And CALL has been working very closely with the Chief Scientist on her open access agenda. And CALL is committed to moving towards a research publishing environment where authors and readers have universal, immediate and perpetual open access to the version of record, so the published version, not just the accepted manuscripts. Now, to start that journey, CALL has negotiated a number of read and publish agreements. And if you follow something like Campus Morning Mail, you might have seen these announced recently through that platform and also through other media channels. So these are not, I'm going to be really honest, these are not necessarily the solution to the open access complexity, but they are a step towards increasing open access options for you as researchers and increasing the access to research for the Australian community. So these are hybrid level agreements, and it's really about trying to get rid of that double dipping that we mentioned in that hybrid open access model. So what is happening is that I'm repurposing the library budget, and I will pay a subscription that includes the opportunity for you to publish with no article processing charges. So we are adopting a few of these read and publish agreements over the next year, and we are very interested in your feedback on how useful these are to you going forward. So I know there's lots on this screen and I'll make the slides available to you, but essentially we want to trial these new agreements to increase the discoverability and the visibility of your research. These agreements are designed to support you as you are publishing in your journal of choice, if that is with a publisher that we have these agreements with. And it really, you will know this because when you get accepted to publish, you will get given the option to select open access with no article processing charges as part of your author workflow. So we have one small agreement and two large agreements coming in 2022, which I'm going to just take you through very briefly. The first small agreement is actually currently available now to you, and this is with CSIRO Publishing. So many of you, particularly in the life sciences, will be familiar with CSIRO's journals. So there are 17 covered by this agreement, including 4 that are ranked in Scimago at Q1. There are no limits on the number of articles that you as researchers can publish under this agreement, and there are Creative Commons licensing options for you to assign to your work as the authors. So that is a fairly small agreement, but we are trialling this to see whether it is of interest and of use to Southern Cross University researchers. So we would love your feedback if you do publish in one of these journals. Moving on to the big agreements. So just this week, CALL announced a read and publish agreement with Springer Nature. And this gives you open access with publishing options with no article processing charges in more than 2,000 hybrid journals across the Springer suite. Now, it does not include the Nature Index journals. They were not part of the agreement at this time, but we are hopeful that in future years that might also be part of this. So as I mentioned, at the acceptance stage, you will have the opportunity to publish open access with no article processing charges in those hybrid journals. Now, I had an example on screen earlier from Springer Open, which is Springer's Gold Open Access publishing arm. This agreement doesn't cover those Gold Open Access journals because they are under a different funding model. I don't pay a subscription to those. So this is just for, as I said, it's a very extensive list of more than 2,000 journals that are that hybrid model. So this is where the who pays what stuff comes into the open access conversation and can get a bit confusing. It does offer you a range of different Creative Commons licenses. There is a small caveat with this agreement, which is that Springer Nature are not allowing every single article submitted across the 47 consortium members to be published. They have capped it at a percentage. I think it's about 85% of what has previously been published from those institutions, as an example. So if you are considering publishing in these journals, we would encourage you to do it earlier in the year, but our consortium partner CALL will be monitoring this very closely and keeping us updated if there are any issues with being able to access that open access published agreement. And the third one, which hasn't hit the media yet, is a read and publish agreement that we have accepted with Wiley. Again, another substantial read and publish agreement. There will be another 1,400 journal titles included in that from Wiley's hybrid suite. Again, you can publish open access with no APCs. There are Creative Commons licenses for your author rights. I've said there it's essentially uncapped. So Wiley has put a cap on there, but the cap they've put on is actually higher or more articles than has previously been published across Australasia in these journals. So we don't anticipate that cap being exceeded in 2022. So those are a couple of new initiatives that we have here in the library. And as I said, we've made the decision at the library to take on this financial burden. We're really lucky at this point in time that there is very minimal impact on our budget to be able to provide these agreements. But we're very keen to see to get feedback from you as researchers as to the usefulness of these agreements in your publishing strategies to help you with your compliance, with your impact and the like. Now, just to be aware that if you are taking advantage of these open access publish agreements with Springer, Wiley or CSIRO, there are two things that we ask that you do. Firstly, please be the corresponding author. Now, that's not necessarily an issue if you are publishing with other Southern Cross University researchers, but if you are partnered with another institution, I don't particularly want to be paying for open access where the corresponding author is, say, for example, at UNSW, because I know that UNSW have also signed this agreement and they should be publishing under the UNSW agreement. So this applies to the corresponding authors only. So just be aware of that. And most importantly, you must have the correct affiliation. So the checking on this with the publisher agreements will not be happening here at the university. It will be happening at CALL, which is our consortium partner. So they'll be checking to see, have you used a Southern Cross University Library email address when you've claimed the no option? And have you identified Southern Cross University as your affiliation? Now, I know Julia and I have talked about the importance of affiliation, not just for read and publish agreements, but for a whole lot of other reasons here at the university to do with reporting of metrics and getting a better sense of the great research publishing that's happening. So we ask that you make sure you affiliate at the university level rather than at the faculty or research centre level, so that you can take advantage of these initiatives and so that we can report on the activity appropriately. So that's all I had for you today. We do have more information about open access, of course, on our website. I'd also like to recommend to you a great open textbook that's just come out of QUT called 23 Scholarly Things that you might want to check out. Julia also recommends the Authors Alliance Guide, which again has some great information about your author rights. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them in the chat. We've got a little bit of time if anyone wants to hang around for a few minutes, or please get in contact with us at the library. The library staff would love to help you, and I'm sure Julia's team at the Office of Research would also be willing to talk to you about developing your research and publishing strategies. So thank you very much to everyone for coming today. We'll hang around if there's any other questions, but I am conscious that you're very busy and I know a few people have had to leave already. So thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Claire. That was a great presentation. And I just wanted to note as well, if you have any other queries for the Office of Research, feel free to reach out as well.
Thank you, Julia, and it was great to have to collaborate with you on this presentation today. And I'm sure that Julia will make this recording available and the slides available, and I'm sure Julia will include those on the next newsletter from the Office of Research.
Thanks, Claire. Happy to.
Okay. Well, I might.
Claire, it's Jackie. Thanks from me as well. I also just wanted to say that Lexi, the ADR for education is here, which is really great, Lexi. So if you'd be able to promote amongst your faculty, but also maybe Julia, if you can encourage the other ADRs within each faculty to promote the news, especially about loading accepted versions into research portal and the read and publish agreements. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jackie.
I'll stop recording now and I'll let you all go have a nice lunch break.